Grease, directed by Randall Kleiser, is a movie musical pop culture icon. The original Broadway musical is also influential because of its part in a wave of musical theater excellence during the 1970s. Other musicals that represent this period include A Chorus Line and The Rocky Horror Show. However, the original theater production of Grease and the movie adaptations differ in terms of tone and artistic style quite severely, to put it mildly. This difference can be seen when evaluating how the original play and the Broadway musical constructs the sexual revolution and how it relates to postmodernism, a subversive and reflexive artistic style, in contrast to how Grease the movie changes the tone of the play and relates to metamodernism, a hybrid of modernism and postmodernism. What do I mean by this? The original play of Grease presents a postmodern pastiche of the 50s. This contrast is visual when you look at the representation and its reaction to the nostalgia of the 1950s. While the original play of Grease presents a postmodern pastiche of the 50s, Grease the movie turns the original postmodern piece into a metamodern representation by looking through the 50s with rose-tinted glasses.
Hey Marty, are those new glasses? Oh yeah, just got them for school. Don't you think they make me look smarter? Nah, you can still see your face.
Grease, the original play, was written by Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey, and debuted in the Kingstone Mines nightclub in Chicago, Illinois in 1971. The play was based on Jacobs' high school experiences in the 1950s, and was described as aggressive and profane. Unlike the movie, the original play was focused on cutting through the aura of the golden age of America, and accurately portraying what teenage life was like at the beginning of the sexual revolution. At this stage, the play included plot lines involving teenage pregnancy and abortion. The play also had way more swearing. Characters were really mean to each other and crass, and allusions to the hypocrisy of the glossy image of the 1950s constructed by American advertising firms and popular television of the time. A major metaphor for the golden age is the play's reference to Sandra Dee, a huge teen idol who was a role model for many young girls at the time, but also suffered from depression, alcoholism, and anorexia. While the metaphor of Sandra Dee remains in later reproductions of the musical, the play also had more sexually explicit references that later productions omitted for a larger audience. Sandra Dee also functions as a metaphor for Sandy's character arc. Once a sexually repressed young girl, Sandy blossoms into a mature young woman who feels free to express herself as she would like, not according to what society imposes on her as being proper. While Sandra Dee, for many girls, was a role model, Sandy is offended when Rizzo calls her that name. This is because Sandy either understands that that image is a construction, or knows that her individuality is not authentically from that image. The original play made great efforts to depict teenage life in the 50s accurately, not only by including large amounts of swearing and sexually explicit references, but also by alluding to the revolt against sex norms at the time. This was achieved through the metaphors of hypocritical and cultivated images of the 50s that were once believed to be symbols of ideal behavior.
You pig!
I love it when you talk dirty.
As alluded to in the previous section, Grease is a postmodern piece because of its critical dissection of teenage life in the 1950s. This is a defining tenet of postmodernism. Grease was one of the first pieces of art that looked past the nostalgia and the propaganda of the 1950s, a fantasy perpetuated by television shows and movies like Leave It to Beaver and Gidget, including a plotline about teenage pregnancy and specifically dedicating a song and scenes to talking about Rizzo's pregnancy from her own perspective, were integral to making this point. As Scott Miller puts it in his article, Inside Grease, Grease's subplot with Rizzo and her fear of pregnancy was a real part of life in the 50s for many unmarried, sexually active women. Birth control was not a widely embraced idea yet, and the contraceptive pill, the catalyst for the sexual revolution, was yet to be invented during the events of Grease. Bringing a taboo issue to the forefront is a direct infringement on the image of the 1950s, removing the romanticism from that period. Not only is the romanticism removed, but simply looking into the past through a critical lens is postmodern as well. Linda Hutchin writes about postmodern parody referring to a satirical recall of past art or pastiche, saying, "Postmodernist parody be it architecture, literature, painting, film, or music, uses its historical memory, its aesthetic introversion, to signal this kind of self-reflexive discourse. Modernism refuses to look to the past and has an idealistic attitude towards art, leaving no room for reflexive discourse about the past. Because Greece directly contradicts modernism, literally and in spirit, it can be viewed as a postmodern piece.
How do I look?
Like a beautiful blonde pineapple.
Grease was moved to Broadway in 1972 and was rewritten as a musical. However, its message stayed close to the original play for the most part. The original musical still contained a lot of swearing and sexual innuendos, but as Jim Jacobs said, we were told it was necessary to make the characters lovable instead of scaring everybody. The show went from about 3/4 book and 1/4 music to 1/4 book and 3/4 music. In 1978, a film adaptation of Grease was released to critical acclaim, and it receives a lasting reverence from each new generation that watches it. However, Grease the movie and Grease the musical are very different. Where the original musical was still very critical of the 50s, Grease the movie relies largely on the nostalgia for the 50s. The film had locations, costumes, characters that were lively and colorful. New dynamics like rival gangs were only previously mentioned in the musical, and there was a car chase? Yeah, that was just added for the movie. It's not in the original musical. Characters have stronger bonds, and new musical numbers like Hopelessly Devoted and You're the One That I Want were added specifically to enhance Olivia Newton-John's performance as Sandy Olsen, a sweet Australian immigrant. Notice the name and character change from Sandy Dombrowski, the new girl who was rejected from attending a private Catholic school. The tone of Grease is softened. While Rizzo's pregnancy is still a plotline, the movie is more focused on the 50s aesthetic, whereas the musical and the play were quick to dismiss this as pastiche. Grease was turned into a happy summer flick instead of showcasing the raw points of the original piece. This was unfortunately to the detriment of the legacy of Grease. Because of the success of the movie, all subsequent theatrical productions have become adaptations of the film instead of the original musical. The Burger Palace Boys are now the T-Birds. The new songs from the movie are now a part of the theatrical shows. And the musical has been significantly edited down to make it more family-friendly and accessible. On the New Line Theater website, you can find a comparison of all the lines changed according to the most current published script of the musical. These include lines changed to "You're gonna get a knuckle sandwich" from "It's gonna be your ass," and "Son of a bee" from "Son of a bitch." Grease has changed meaning entirely. However, the remnants of the realistic look at teenage life in the 50s are still slightly present with Rizzo's pregnancy, and other characters' sexualities still being openly displayed. Is Grease still postmodern work?
Don't feel bad if I bump you out, because it doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's what you do with your dancing shoes.
Grease the movie takes on both characteristics of postmodernism and modernism. Grease still has the backbone of what the original play was, a somewhat realistic glimpse into the 50s, with some criticism of the constructed 50s image. The metaphor of Sandra Dee and the Rydell High student's sexuality, including Rizzo's pregnancy, is still present, and the movie still ends with Sandy becoming sexually liberated and free to be herself. The postmodern attitude of the play is built into the story and cannot be completely shed unless the entire script is rewritten to change major plot elements. However, the film, as stated before, clearly does not have the same attitude about the 50s as the original play. Because the focus on the romantic features of the 50s aesthetic, the film comes off as idealistic. Tim Vermeulen and Robert Van Den Acker, oh my god, created the concept of metamodernity, and write in the article Notes on Metamodernism, Metamodernism practices set out to fulfill a mission or task they know they will not, can never, and should never accomplish: the unification of two opposed poles. The two poles referring to modernism and postmodernism. Two concepts that were thought to be contradictory, but that can somehow come together to create a new artistic style. Grease the movie tries to appease the audience's response and love for nostalgia, while being forced to keep to the original critique that Grease, the play, was trying to make about nostalgia. Because of its modern influences, Warren Casey has stated that with the creation of the movie, they created a new jazz age. It's just like the 20s. The 50s had become romanticized beyond recognition. Greece's depiction of the sexual revolution, once made realistic by the use of vulgar, shocking humor, is now watered down to incorporate the 50s that the audiences know, a time of greasers, drive-ins, wholesome family values, before America was informed on what was happening in the Vietnam War. Grease the original theater production and Grease the movie are two different beasts, and it may explain why it's not one of the most popular shows around anymore. Because the movie has such a weird tone, Sandy is often criticized for being vapid, and audiences get confused on why they're supposed to like a group of shitty teenagers. Sexual liberty of heterosexual couples is not really on the forefront of everyone's minds. We have bigger fish to fry. So anyone really critiquing the movie on this seemingly glossed over perspective of the 50s, the best way to consume Grease is to enjoy the music, enjoy the crazy over-the-top movie, and have fun, for Christ's sakes. Wop bop a loop bop a wop bam boom, goddammit.